The Metro Vancouver housing market's getting a little bit more interesting this month. We're seeing interest rates on pause, inflation still lingering, and global uncertainty continuing to impact buyer confidence. And at the same time, we see some major shifts kind of happening locally. Detached homes are gaining momentum. Inventory remains near multi-year highs, and developers like Ani are making big progress buying projects over by Lansdowne. So is this signaling confidence in the market and an immediate like shift, or is it more of the same, just people kind of positioning for, Vancouver's a great place to live? What do we think initially about this market and how it's changing?
Well, first of all, Vancouver is a great place to live, so let's just take that off the table. But no, I don't think there's any great shift. I think we are in a slow-moving market situation that is full of opportunity for first-time homebuyers. I think we have prices that we have not seen for a long time in the lower end of the market. And then we have a story with sellers that a lot of sellers don't need to sell and aren't necessarily adjusting their price. There are a few, of course. And of course, we are going into listings and talking about how we need to price correctly in order to sell. But no, I don't think there's any giant shift in the market at this time.
Patti, do you agree?
Yes, I think I do think there's large swaths of the market that haven't responded to the change of what's happened, and that is
Any place
creating.
in particular?
Oh, there's just little pockets of like, oh my gosh, how are they this price when everything else is adjusted? So I think sometimes what happens is, I think that's what stalls the market, by the way. Yeah. And I think that's where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. I think we have already shifted, and there's a lot of, I'm not changing my price, and that might be fine. Come off the market, I guess, if that's how you feel, but stop clogging it up if you're not going to sell for what it actually is worth right now. That's it. And so we have this, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm sure you have, because we have a lot of listings and we had very few showing requests this weekend. Mm-hmm. And that, I would say most of our listings are fairly sharply priced. Like we're staying on top of it.
Yeah.
I'm driving my poor sellers absolutely mad with statistics all day long. But, it didn't translate into an increase in activity. And I think that's because there's just too much, we'll wait and see.
Yes.
I'll give you an example, Adam. Actually, I was looking at a half duplex in Vancouver, and the agent said, yeah, well, all the builders have kind of joined together and they're not going to sell for any less. And I thought, well, they are eventually, because that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
And so, and he kind of smiled and was like, yeah, I guess. But it was kind of funny because I thought, oh my goodness, like we have this whole group of people that are quite convinced that nothing's happened. And let me tell you, something's happened. It's maybe flattened out. I don't think it's going to be a continual slide, because I do think most people will come off the market. There's a lot of staying power. We all have fair good equity in our homes. If there's no reason to sell because it doesn't make financial sense, people won't do it. And that will create more activity because there will be less to buy.
Right.
I also think the buyers need to give their heads a shake right now. They're all out there writing ridiculously low offers because they've heard that the market is in terrible condition and they're going to just write all over the place. And then if they don't get what they want, they move on. And there's some uninformed agent that's willing to write that offer and carry on and on. So that's also another problem. So I just think we're in this period of, we don't know really what's happened yet. And so once we do, people will adjust. Sellers will decide if they can sell for that price. Buyers will decide if they want to buy. And the market will clean itself up. But we are in a very kind of stuck place right now. That's what I would call it. And we see that by the number of showings.
It's two very good summaries of the market. When we're looking at residential home sales in the region, there was about 2,100 sales, which is only about 2.5% lower than April last year. It's 23% below the 10-year average. Are we seeing stabilization, or is this more of a continued slide in terms of sales?
No, I think we are seeing some sales for sure, but it's hard to say how much. I don't believe there's going to be a further slide. We had an offer going back and forth, and the agent was, giving my sellers a fair amount of trouble in terms of what they would pay. And my sellers finally said, no, we're not going to sell at that price, Patti. Thank you. And they were right, because the next morning, the guy paid the last price that they had put as a counter. And he was happy to do it, even though he said his buyer could afford no more. So there's a fine line between what people are saying and believing and what's really happening. And, again, I just come back to my point. I think there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misinformation, and we will sort it out. Like it'll sift through and get sorted, but it might take another couple of months. I think it'll definitely take another couple of months.
When we're talking about sales here, it's an interesting point of what's happening with the detached market and like the multifamily market. So right now, what the stats are showing is that detached sales are actually up 14%, while apartments are down over 10%. So we're kind of seeing this market separate between the detached and then townhome condos. Why do you think that separation is happening right now?
Well, the number of listings, right? There's way less, proportionately, there's way less single family homes for sale than there are condominiums. And, there's a lot of giants in the sky right now that people aren't wanting to complete on, and it's going to mess things up. They bought them 3 years ago. They're underwater. They don't want to complete. There's a lot of things going on with condos that aren't happening with single family homes. Now, it directly affects if you're a seller of a single family home going to buy a condo, or you're selling your condo and trying to buy a house. There is some relationship to it, but the inventory is just not there, Adam, for single family homes. It's not.
Do you think it shows anything or any relation with price point? Like, do you think that the higher price point is now stabilizing and buyers are willing to jump in at those higher prices for a detached? Shows that buyers have more buying power at a certain price point, or is it simply just there's too much inventory for the attached and it's just clogging up the market? There's more to view, which means more showings, which means more tours, which means longer decision making.
Jen, what do you think when you take someone out to show them a condo?
There's no doubt there's a lot to choose from, but I think it is really important to understand, listen, you're not going to fall in love with everything you see. And so you can go looking and looking and looking. But the really important thing to know right now is if you see one you love, you need to go for it. And I think someday we'll probably look back at the prices that are happening right now and think, oh, some buyers that decide, oh, I'm going to wait for the bottom. No, they should have bought right now. So, it's hard to say exactly what's going on, but what I will say is I think it's a great sign. I'm happy to hear that the detached market is moving. I think that will free up some capital. It will free up the ability of whoever's selling that detached home to either downsize and purchase a condo at a great price, share some of the wealth with their family that maybe has not been able to save that down payment.
Exactly.
And we've been predicting that this was going to happen. So that might be, I can't say exactly why detached is doing what it's doing, but indeed, if it is doing it, I think it will start to make the rest of the market move.
Mm-hmm.
Good insight. When we're looking at newly listed properties for sale on the MLS, there were about 6,700 newly listed homes. It's 2.4% decrease from April 2025. A 15% increase over the 10-year average. And then when we're looking at total listings, it's really flat. Year over year, we're only up 0.2%. So there's just over 16,000 listings April 2026. It's still about 38% higher than the 10-year average. So we are at a multi-year high for inventory. When we're looking at new listings, which are slightly down year over year, but still above the 10-year average, are we seeing sellers hold back, or are they just pacing the market?
I think they just are deciding whether or not it makes sense to sell right now. And, depends on what they're doing.
Yeah, so I see how it depends on what they're doing. In past episodes, what we've talked about is just minding the gap between what you sell for and what you're going to buy for. You're going to sell for less. Proportionally, you should be also buying for less as well. Are we seeing our sellers, are they receptive to the idea that those two things can happen when they're in this process of buying and selling?
I think the hardest choice to sell right now is when you're cashing out of the market. I think it's a really difficult time to make that decision. We see a lot of people that maybe are helping a loved one who's moved into assisted living. It's time for them to cash out of the market. And it's really hard for them to understand, say, what the property was valued at in 2021 and then what the number they're looking at now. They're like, it's different. And so I think that there is a bit of hesitation for that to take place. And then what happens is they start to kind of think, oh, well, you know what? Maybe I'll put in the money for the renovation. Maybe I'll rent it out. And then they start to realize, no. Renovation costs are through the roof. The rent that I can charge is also coming down because there's a lot of inventory. And I think that person is the most hesitant right now. So yeah, there is some hesitation, especially if anybody is selling like a second property or an investment they had. They're in tough.
With over 16,000 active listings, we are at multi-year highs for inventory. Does this change seller strategy?
Well, you have to be well priced and you have to look amazing.
You have to be the cheapest and the prettiest.
That should be, it's a beauty contest and a price war, and you need to win both, is what the saying is. But that's it. That's any market, really. It should, if you're going to sell, you should prepare. You should prepare for both the financial side of it and how it looks and how it's presented to the buyers.
The interesting thing I would say is that even some of our sellers that are absolutely gorgeous, beautifully renovated, sharply priced in a fantastic neighborhood, and we're not getting offers. That's a shock to me. But I actually think it's a bit dependent that product needs to have the person who's got their detached. They need to sell that and move into it. It's ready to go. It's renovated. It's beautiful. We're kind of almost waiting for that detached sale so that downsizer moves into that condo.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
When we're looking at sales to active listing ratio, it's 13.5%, which is pretty much in a balanced market right now, teetering on the buyer side. What needs to happen for this to either stay the same or shift and go into a seller's market? Do we see any of those changes happening anytime?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think like significant
No, we don't.
inventory are the only thing that will really make it go crazy. Because I don't think buyers are all going to jump off in a big stampede. But where it will start to change is kind of what Patty's talking about. Like if a whole bunch of sellers hesitate or a whole bunch of people come off the market and that inventory starts to come down, we might see some change out of that, whether it's
it'll be very subtle but it definitely I think it will happen. I do. And I think as I said, I think a lot of the buyers a lot of the sellers have a tremendous amount of staying power. And at some point they will just say no. It's interesting with the condo market because, and again, a lot of those pre-sales that are coming due, that will be interesting to see what happens there, because I'm not sure if they have as much staying power. But in a single family home, most people are pretty solid and they have somewhere to live. It doesn't make sense. So unless you have to sell, unless you become a have to sell, which is, maybe there's a divorce or a death or a move that you absolutely have to make for a job, you might not sell. And that will clean up the market for sure.
When we're talking about pricing across all segments does remain relatively flat month over month as inventory levels remain pretty high to kind of keep everything at bay here. Home price index has been declining since March 2025. So it really is 13 straight months of declines. Right now, we're sitting at a HPI of 1.1 million. That's just your benchmark price to get into Vancouver, considering all price segments. It's about 7% decrease over April 2025. So from last year, about 7% down, 0.6% compared to March 2026. So not much change month over month. Are we forming a price floor?
Yeah, I actually don't, as I stood right at the very beginning, I don't think everyone's actually come to terms with where the market is. And there are certain segments where nothing has changed visibly. So if that's the case, unless it does, nothing moves. And so I don't think we've hit, if you're asking me, have we hit the floor yet? Maybe in some areas, but not all, because they haven't moved. Like I can look at some listings right now and compare 22, 2021, 2023 pricing, and they're exactly the same. And that's impossible. That's impossible.
Yeah.
And yet people are still holding that line. They're going back to that artificial market that we had post-COVID or during COVID with interest rates at 1.75%. And they're trying to attain that and they can't. So they don't sell. So then what happens? The market is clogged with inventory and everyone's stuck for a while and it always unsticks.
So are you saying there's more downward pressure, potential downward pressure to come?
I think, Adam, the downward pressure is that things that are sold are not what people are asking. The prices things have sold for are not what people are asking in a lot of cases. So the question's kind of a funny one because the reality is if everyone went to the level of pricing that moved the properties, they would sell.
Yeah.
But they don't. And so the crux of this is until you are aware of what the sales are and you buy into that, you're just for sale, but you're probably not going to sell. That's it. So I think there is a floor. I just don't think everyone wants to admit that there's a floor. Okay.
Well said. I think that's a lot of great information. Any last comments before we wrap it up?
This isn't necessarily real estate related, but I just wanted to say, and depending on when our viewers or listeners are taking this in, happy Mother's Day to all the moms. Where would we all be without you? Because you really are the heart of most homes, just to bring it back to real estate. But happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, it's good, Jen. Happy Mother's Day to you, Jen.
Thank you.
I just want to say, I guess that we talk about this endlessly, but there's a really, really good opportunity for first-time buyers right now to get into the market. There is a plethora of choice and the interest rates are solid and this will not last. Like it will change. And there will be people that will say, I should have. And we have one investor right now looking and he said, you know, Patti, I realize I shouldn't be doing what everyone else is doing. So I'm going to buy now. And I think, hooray! Like that is the attitude. So there are some great opportunities and we're here to help if you have any questions.
Awesome.
Right on. We'll see you next month.